and Bell set? Okay. Then we will start. We will open the Monday, October 19th council meeting, and roll call show all councilors are present. Agenda review. The first, we have a request to add order 20-183. I would ask for a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Nancy, do you want to take a roll call vote for this?
Yes. There's my list. And I'm going to do it in reverse tonight. So, Councilor Greenier,
In approval.
Councilor Robertson,
Approved.
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Mehnert,
In favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
Favor.
and Councilor Kunz.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and then none opposed.
All right, so we will put order 2183 on the new business portion of our agenda. So we're moving on to approval of the minutes of August 26th, September 14th, October 1st, and October 5th. Nancy must have had a good time off because she's very busy. Did anyone have any changes or questions on them? If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
Move
Move
approval.
approval. Second.
All right. Nance,
Okay, Councilor Greenier,
In approval.
Councilor Robertson,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Mehnert,
in favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
In favor.
and Councilor Kunz.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and there were none opposed.
Great, thank you. We'll now move to public hearings. Public hearing A, to consider vitulers licenses for the following businesses. Max Convenience Stores LLC, doing business as Circle K, number 7089, 53 Main Street. Max Convenience Stores LLC, doing business as Circle K, number 7021, 2 Stillwater Avenue. Brewers of the North, doing business as Aroma Joe's, 99 Park Street. Big Shoe Inc., doing business as Subway, and Big Shoe Inc., doing business as Subway, 10 Stillwater Street. In the background, it says that everything was going well, but are we having someone speak on this?
We normally would have Dave Mylan speak. Oh, we are not Facebook Live. Belle, would you please get us to Facebook Live?
I'm working on it.
All right, thank you. All of these businesses, the appropriate inspections have been complete. They are current with their personal property taxes, and staff recommends approval of the vitulers licenses. And just to remember, vitulers is for entities that prepare food on site.
Do we have anyone of the public that wants to speak for or against the issuing of this license? If you do, I guess you raise your hand. I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand, so I will close public hearing A and move on to public hearing B, to consider a Class 1 malt, spirituous, and vinous liquor license and vitulers license for S&M Corporation, doing business as Thai Orchid, 28 Mill Street. Sophie, you covering this one too?
I'm actually going to allow Dave to talk.
Can you hear me okay?
So we're on Ty Orkin.
And the staff has reviewed the application, conducted the inspections, and recommends approval of the license.
Thank you very much. Is there any one in the attendees that wish to speak for or against the issuing of this license? Please raise your hand. Seeing no one, we'll move on to public hearing C, which I believe we're going to table regarding the Collins Center. Do I have to take a motion for that?
I think so.
Sophia, actually, you can we can just continue it to next, we open it, but we continue it to next month.
Okay,
Don't need a motion.
so I've opened it and we'll leave it open till next month. Moving on to public hearing D, to consider a Class 1 Golf Club Spirituous Finest and Malt Liquor License, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victualer's license for Penobscot Valley LLC, doing business as Penobscot Valley Country Club, 366 Main Street. Dave?
Yeah, again, this is Dave Mylan. I'm the Director of Community Development, and staff has done inspections. The Life Safety Code inspector has some issues he's working with the applicant on. There's not anything he felt that needed to tie things up or that would deny it. It's just that he'll be putting his own restrictions on it until their work's done. They're doing a lot of remodeling, and so some of this area can't be used until the remodeling is done.
Okay, so we don't need to amend it.
Correct.
Okay.
That's how I believe it. Is that correct, Sophie?
She's nodding her head, yes. Okay, all right. Does anyone in the public wish to speak for or against the issuing of this license? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will close public hearing D and move on to public hearing E, to consider a Maine Municipal Association Model General Assistance Ordinance, appendices A through H, for the period of October 1, 2021, to be in compliance with Title 22 MRSA Section 4305, subsection 4. Sophie, is that you?
Yes, that is. So if you look in the town's code of ordinances, we have a general assistance ordinance, and that does not change very frequently. What changes is every year the state creates appendices that give us the maximums or the allowed amounts that we're allowed to give people who are requesting assistance. So this would be maximum income levels that would be allowed, and also maximum amounts that we would expend out. While a public hearing would make it seem like we have a lot of choice, we really don't. If we elect not to follow the guidelines, we elect not to get the 90% reimbursement from the state for the program. So when somebody who is unable to meet their basic needs, so food, shelter, medical assistance, comes to the town, we take an application. It's a state MMA model application that we use. We review their circumstance. We run their household budget and income through the the maximums, and we determine whether or not they are eligible to receive assistance. If they receive assistance the first time, when they get that assistance, they usually have multiple criteria that they have to meet for the second time they come back. And one of those is to look at state assistance. So general assistance is a temporary stopgap assistance that all towns are required to fund. If we do it in accordance with the state rules, we get reimbursed. If we don't, then we can't get reimbursed for those funds. If we don't have approved maximums, then we can get into trouble for not meeting the local welfare mandate. Is that at all helpful?
Yep, works for me. Does anyone in the public have any questions regarding this assistance program? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and move on to public hearing F to determine whether it is in the best interest of the town to dispose of town-owned property at 98 Penobscot Street, tax map 20 lot 8. Sophie.
I'm going to start this one, but we actually have Dave Mylan and Rob Yerxa here. The property at 98 Penobscot Street used to be the Public Works facility right up until we built the new one out on Kelly Road. We've gone through a brownfields assessment and have a voluntary response action plan, letter of no assurance letter of assurance, from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. The town council sent us on a mission to try to come up with a private partner to perhaps redevelop the site in a way that they felt would be consistent with the neighborhood. And we've not had any luck with that. When we talked at workshop, we thought we had somebody who was willing to step forward. That person has backed out of the project. So the purpose of this public hearing is for us to just make sure that we are going to dispose of the property, meaning sell it, transfer it. And if so, to vote on that. So we've held the public hearing. You would vote that if you determine that it's in the town's best interest to sell the parcel. And then we're hoping you can give us some guidance as to next steps. What I'd like to do is briefly have Rob review the VRAP that we have in place and what conditions that puts on the property. And then Dave to talk a little bit about what redevelopment might look like there.
Yeah, so in 2017, the town worked with Sebago Technics to help us through the DEP VRAP program. The VRAP program is the Voluntary Response Action Program that allows property owners to come forward voluntarily and have their properties reviewed for environmental impacts, and then to get letters from the DEP called no action assurance letters that say that the DEP has reviewed the environmental assessments of the property and may or may not have some restrictions for future use of that property. But essentially puts you in a position to avoid penalties should something be found at a future date. Excuse me. In 2017, we completed a phase 2 environmental site assessment. That included some groundwater monitoring, as well as several soil probes that were tested for a number of different potential contaminants based on the former industrial type use of the property. The results of those tests were actually quite good. We actually didn't find any contaminated soils nor groundwater. But despite the test results, which were somewhat preliminary, the DEP, based on the previous use and the length of the use, still put some restrictions on potential future use of the property. The primary one, which spans, we asked the DEP, since we weren't quite sure exactly how the property might be used, we asked the DEP for restrictions for 3 different types of use: a commercial and industrial use, a multi-unit residential use, and then a single family use. Restrictions that span all 3 of those categories were groundwater extraction. So somebody couldn't have a drinking well on the property, which is okay because it's served by the Orono VZ Water District. The other one was excavation. So there's limitations on digging on the property without specific soil management plans in place. So it's not to say digging isn't allowed, but there are some steps that need to be taken before that is done, because there's a potential that you could encounter some contaminated soils. So you have to have a plan in place to deal with that before you actually start digging. The other restrictions were sort of, depending on the use, more and more restrictive. So the commercial and industrial use, which is similar to what the use was before we closed the facility, essentially had no more restrictions beyond those two. The requirement was that you had to maintain the existing cover. But if you wanted to use the site as is, you could. Multi-unit residential, it was another step, a little bit more restrictive. Of course, the two restrictions carried, as well as some light landscaping or a thin layer of cover that could be accomplished by paving, landscaping, those types of things, to cover any potentially contaminated soils. In this case, no digging, for example, like a vegetable garden or something like that would require a little bit more assessment. And then the third, the single family homes required a 2-foot cover of the entire property to protect. Single family uses typically come with flower gardens and those types of things. So to prevent any accidental exposure to contaminated soils, the 2-foot in the developed area, the 2-foot of cover was required to create a buffer between potentially contaminated soils and the soils that the property would be exposed on the property. So those are the 3 major categories, and each step required a little bit more restrictive cover for the use. The caveat to all that is if a property owner wanted to go through the process of a more extensive soil assessment, for example, they could potentially eliminate some of the restrictions that the DEP put on. So we just went to a phase 2, which is a pretty extensive assessment, but there's even more testing that could be done, a little bit more of an exhaustive search for contaminated soils that could be done. And if those came back without finding any contaminants, the DEP said that they would be open to reducing the restrictions on the property if a property owner wanted to go through that process. So that was completed in early 2018, and all of the deed restrictions have been recorded, and it's pretty much ready to go. Questions on that?
I have one, of course. If there were single family homes to be put on that, would the town be responsible for that 2-foot cover, to put a 2-foot cover on if there was a developer that wanted to do that? Or would that be part of a purchase and sale agreement? How would that work?
It could work either way. I'm guessing depending on how the offer came to the town could do it, or the property owner could say that they would do it. Either way, all we'd have to do is make sure that it did get done at some point before the development happened.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
I would suggest that we make it if that were the case, then we would probably want to make that a part of the terms of the property owner. The new property owner would have to take on that responsibility.
Okay.
Rob, can I interject in there? Isn't there's product on the property that could be used for that purpose, is there not?
Yes, when we left the property, we left, about 300 or 400, probably 500 yards of screened fill on the site. That works out to be about the amount of material you would need. So the material is on site. There'd have to be some testing done and it might need to be screened a little bit more. It's a 6" minus screen, so it might need to be screened a little bit finer to qualify, but the material's right there on site for somebody who wanted to use it, which is
Okay.
why we left it there.
Why don't we see if there's any public comment on this at the counselors? We can talk about it in new business. So is there any member of the public that wishes to raise their hand to speak on this matter? I see no one. So I will close public hearing F and move on to acknowledgements by council members. Councilor Perry, you're up first.
Goodness. I would like to acknowledge the recent passing of longtime Orono resident Imogene Brightman, who served as a wonderful elementary school teacher at the Asa Adams School for many years. Just a nice lady and a great teacher.
Thank you. Lori?
Hi, I want to acknowledge our town clerk and all of the volunteers and employees of the town that worked at the New Balance Fieldhouse on Saturday from 11 to 3, well, plus set up and clean up. It was a really cold and miserable day, but there was quite a turnout, it's appeared to me, of people voting, and they had it very well organized to make sure that it complied with the state regulations of no more than 50 people in the building. And it was just a really wonderfully done event. And I also want to acknowledge the passing of Orono resident Betty Carr, who lived in the Sailor neighborhood and was an Orono Asa Adams Elementary School teacher and had a beautiful garden and was well loved by the community.
Thank you. Councilor Greenier?
Two things. More so, I guess more now than ever. I know that we all get into the world of Amazon and stuff like that, but I ask that people to still remember our local businesses, lots of crafty kind of places, plus restaurants. Now's a great time to go to restaurants and buy some gift cards, and just to continue to support those businesses because they do need us as we come into the winter and it's going to get even a bit more complicated. Speaking of winter, I also wanted to kind of remind everybody that starting the daily overnight parking ban starts November 1st through April 15th. So no parking on the street after November 1st or in the evening, late overnight. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Councilor Kunz?
Hi there. Yes, thank you. I also want to acknowledge Betty Carr's passing. She was a neighbor of mine. She's wonderful. We went to the same church, and she's truly missed. She's just wonderful. Also, to further echo Lori's sentiments, I had a note here to really thank the work being done by all of our election workers, and especially with the increased voter turnout and all the insane things we have to dance around this year. Between early voting and COVID-19 and the pandemic. They're doing phenomenal work there. If you haven't voted yet, please do it. And you can still vote in person early. Saturday wasn't the only point, so be sure you're aware of that. And also, I'd like to acknowledge the Orono High School Fall Arts Extravaganza. Even with COVID and rulings against performance arts being in confined spaces, they were somehow able to pull off an outdoor performance, although Saturday got rained out. Make sure you go this coming weekend. There's information available there. And I'm not sure if they're sold out, but just check on Facebook, that's happening. And dress warm, because they're either gonna get rained out or frozen out, one or the other. The last thing I have here, I'm trying to think here. Just a reminder, it's crazy. It's still crazy out there, and it's a really difficult time. So be patient, be kind. I think everyone's hoping for the best. And I don't care if you're driving down the road, be kind. These are kind of things that we try to instill in our kids all the time. It's time to remind ourselves and instill them in ourselves again. So stick with us. We're gonna get through this.
Thank you, Sam. Megan?
I'm sitting here kind of shook thinking about winter. Thanks, Terry. It's October. Don't do that to me. So today I was walking to Asa Adams to pick my daughter up from school, and we came across Halloween Alley outside the town hall, which is really, really cute. I'm sorry, it's very scary, very spooky. And just great job, staff. That I think that's really going to brighten a lot of kids' days to see that, which leads me to the next point, which is that the town, although we can't do trunk or treat this year, has all kinds of stuff going on. If you hop on to orono.org, right on the front page, there's a button that will tell you about all of the activities that you and your family can participate in for Halloween through the town. So please check that out. And while you're on that page, right next to that is a button that will tell you all about the election stuff that you need to know upcoming. So as Sam mentioned, we have a couple more dates for in-person absentee voting. Thursday, the 22nd, which will be in council chambers, and Friday, the 30th, which will also be in council chambers. When you're there, you can register to vote. You can change your registration. You can just pick up a ballot and take it home with you. You can fill it out there and turn it in. And so all that information is on orono.org. So please do check that out. And yes, thank you to all of the volunteers and town staff that are making this stuff happen in unprecedented, difficult times.
Thank you, Megan. Councilor Robertson?
Is there anything left to say? I will acknowledge all of those people, not just staff, but all the people that have already voted. Thank you so much for doing that. That's going to make election day a little bit easier. And also all of those people who are continuing to mask. I appreciate it. Our families appreciate it. You're helping us all. So like Sam said, we're all in this together. So let's keep doing it, keep doing what we're doing.
Thank you. I believe there's 2,000 ballots received back at this time, according to our town of Orono. And I also wanted to just acknowledge on our consent agenda that we have an order appointing Zoe Swanson and Celia Boutens as associate youth members for the Library Board of Trustees. I have a feeling they will pass our agenda vote with flying colors, and wanted to welcome them onto the board. With that, I will take a motion to move the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
You guys got to get faster.
We didn't have time to practice this week, so.
Right. All right, with that, I will ask Nancy to take a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Greenier,
In favor.
Councilor Robertson,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
Favor?
Councilor Mehnert,
In favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
and Councilor Kunz.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Great. Consent agenda has passed. We're moving now to new business. Order 2179, order approving a notice of election to be held on March 9th, 2021, in conjunction with the annual municipal election, with polls open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for consideration of ordinance amendments to the Town of Orono ordinances for the addition of section 18-153 marijuana establishments and the amendment of section 18-106 schedule of uses to chapter 18 land use to establish performance standards and zoning regulations for marijuana establishments, as well as the addition of Article 3 marijuana establishments to Chapter 29, Public Health and Safety, to establish licensing requirements for marijuana establishments should the town of Orono decide to opt in to allow such establishments. I will take a motion, please,
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
All right. And Kyle doing this one?
No, actually, I gave Kyle some time off. He's waiting in the wings just in case.
Okay.
But my thought was that this order really is not about the content of those ordinances. We've been through lots of public conversation about what those ordinances allow when they, if they're adopted. This order is your decision to send that to a referendum as opposed to adopt the ordinance. So you've gone through the public hearing process. We did not receive any comments. The thing I would say is that because of how much you guys had talked about going to referendum, the notice of the public hearing included the fact that if the next step, if it was going to be adopted, would be for it to go to a referendum. So I feel like if you don't want to take it to a referendum at this point, we really need to tell people and probably rehost a public hearing.
Any comments or questions from council? Sophie, I just had a question. Will there be any presentations closer to the referendum?
So I've talked to Kyle, and he is up for trying his hand at a taped informational presentation that we would roll on the website on its own, starting about 60 days before the election. We would also follow that up with likely either part of a council meeting, public hearing, or informational presentation, or a standalone presentation, depending on how much feedback council's getting about this issue. We would want to do that likely 60 days before the election, because absentee ballots will be available 30 days. So we want to give people an opportunity to see it and understand what the ordinance would do.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Hearing, seeing none, I will ask Nancy to take a roll call vote.
Councilor Greenier,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Mehnert,
In favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
and Councilor Kunz.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there are none opposed.
Great. Moving on to Order 20-180, order determining it is in the best interest of the town to dispose of town-owned property at 98 Penobscot Street, tax map 20, lot 8. I'll take a motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Councilors, you heard Rob's explanation at the public hearing. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding this? My questions about the 2-foot cover were answered earlier, so. All right, with that, Nancy, I'll ask you to take a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Greenier,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Mehnert,
In favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
and Councilor Kunz.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
We look forward to seeing what creative ways you come with to dispose of that property. Order 20-181, resolve supporting the creation of an equitable healthcare plan for all Maine residents. I'll take a motion, please.
So
Move
moved.
approval.
And there are about 5 seconds in there too, so.
Nancy, I did not move or second, so you can, when you're sorting it out, you don't have.
Do we want a little presentation or are we good on this?
I'm happy to kind of recap where you are. We had a community member come forward with a request. It was actually the second request. It was just framed a little bit differently that we have received about urging the state legislature to adopt an equitable, affordable healthcare system for all residents in the state of Maine. Originally, the draft resolve that came in front of council attempted to extrapolate the financial impact to Orono, the potential impacts for unemployment that would impact people's health insurance. And the conversation at workshop was very clear that the council wanted to see a much more general urging for the idea of an equitable, affordable healthcare plan. So staff went back to the table based on the workshop discussion, revamped the resolve, and that resolve is pretty straightforward. It is council is saying that affordable, high-quality healthcare is a basic human right that should not be dependent on ability to pay or the employment that somebody holds. That the World Health Organization has passed a resolution urging governments all over the globe to move towards providing all people with access to affordable, quality healthcare services. The U.S. remains the single country of the 33 developed countries without guaranteed access to affordable healthcare services for its citizens. The state of Maine has the ability to implement a system that is simple, straightforward, and provides citizens with adequate healthcare. The current global pandemic and the related job losses highlight the inequity of the current standard of accessing quality healthcare through employment. And developing and deploying this system of equitable and affordable access to adequate healthcare is well beyond the scope of local government. So as a result of all those statements that council has made, it is requesting that the Maine legislature create an equitable healthcare plan that provides every Maine resident with comprehensive medical care from birth to death.
Thank you, Sophie. Anybody have any questions or comments? No?
I appreciate the work done to bring this forward. In the meetings that we went through and the feedback and this is sort of rehashing some of what we talked about in workshop, but I think given that we're in the actual meeting now talking about it, a lot of work went into this, and I think we have some great discussions about it. So I appreciate everybody's input on this. And I think what we have there is something I feel pretty good about.
Yes, I agree. And I think that the way that it relates to local government is pretty clear. I mean, healthcare costs for all employers are pretty dramatic portions of their budget, and the town of Orono is no exception. I know that we talked a little bit about whether this was a overly partisan or politicized issue. I still feel strongly that healthcare is a human right and should not be a partisan issue or politicized. And of course, it is because of generations worth of very successful corporate lobbying. But I think that I don't know whether the legislature will care whether the town of Orono passes this resolve, but I think that it is important as a value statement but also just because it really does impact, you property taxpayers out there. I mean, this really does impact your budget for the town. So I'm very supportive of this resolution.
Anyone else? I just want to say that as a general rule, I'm really don't like to pass resolutions. I don't feel from a municipal level that they have a lot of power. I do appreciate that council narrowed this one down to, to really focus on how it would impact the town of Orono. So I appreciate that we got to a point where I felt like it wasn't just a general statement, but that Orono would be impacted by this. So if there's no other comments, I will ask Nancy to take a vote from council.
I have a comment, which is
Councilor Greenier?
thank the, I thank the citizen who brought this forward. It's wonderful the work that she and I assume others did in addition to our staff to make the wording something that we could all agree on, or most of us agree on.
Okay. Anyone else before I ask Nancy to take the vote? No, hearing none. Nancy, please.
Sorry, Councilor Greenier,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor.
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Mehnert,
In favor.
Councilor Perry,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
Councilor Kunz,
In favor.
and the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Thank you very much. Moving on to order 20-182, order authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement with the Sebago Technics of South Portland, Maine for planning and preliminary design services related to the Main Street Sidewalk Safety and ADA Improvements Project in an amount not to exceed $65,750 with funds drawn from the infrastructure capital reserves. The motion, please.
So moved.
And a
Second.
Rob, Sophie,
Yeah, good evening, Rob Yerxa, I'm Public Works Director. So in September, we put out a request for qualifications, an RFQ, for engineering and planning services to begin to execute the Main Street sidewalks safety and ADA improvements project. On October 1st, we received 8 proposals, 8 statements of qualification. And a team of staff members here reviewed the proposals and scored the proposal from Sebago Technics as the highest and felt like they were the most qualified and best fit to help the town work through this project. The scope of services that we're asking to fund tonight are all the pre-construction consulting services that we need to make sure that we involve the public, that we gather all the data that we possibly can to make the planning for the project possible over the winter, conduct a couple public hearings, involve an advisory committee to help guide planning decisions for the project. We will develop a few concepts, probably 2 or 3 conceptual designs for the corridor that will be vetted by the advisory committee and be presented in a public meeting, and then bring those concepts down to a final design, which will again be vetted by the committee. Also during this process, we'll be working to develop construction budgets and plans to move the project forward.
Rob, could you remind us again what area of sidewalks is it from the bridge to Kelly Road, or how far
Yep,
is it?
so, of course, the available funding may change the finishes that we put in certain specific areas, but the scope of the project is right from the bridge all the way to Kelly Road. And so we will be making all the safety and ADA improvements required in that corridor, and then working to reconstruct the physical infrastructure that's there too.
Do you have any idea about the timeline, when this might start, when the construction might start?
We're gonna work our hardest to get the project ready to go for this summer. The only thing that may change that is that there may be some state and federal funding that will help us pay for a significant part of this project that may not be available for construction until the following year. But we're gonna have to vet that and work to see what parts of the project maybe can be phased into a second year and address priority work, crosswalk construction improvements, those kinds of things for this coming construction season, so that we can perhaps garner some grant funding to help pay for a large portion of the project in the following year. So the goal is to get it done as soon as possible, but I think you're going to see a phased approach where we take care of priority issues first in this coming construction season and finish everything out in the following one.
Also, just for the big picture here, this has been an incredibly long time in coming with planning, and something we've been dealing with budget-wise and dealing with like the traffic study. And so this has been years and years in the works. And a lot of input has been put into this. And so I'm excited that we're here. And, I had a point and a question I wanted to bring up, and in my dramatic introduction, it has completely formed a coup. So anyway, but it's just this will be like the downtown will be a little bit more, shall we say, aesthetically planned out than some of the utilitarian patches we've had over the last couple of years that I know some people weren't fond of. But those were just a fix until we could get to this big overall plan. Correct, Rob?
Yeah, Sam, we're excited to get this one going too, because you're right. We've been working to make sure that we do this one the right way the first time. And so, and to be patient, understanding that if we can garner funds from other sources, not have to spend town funds on the project, that's always a benefit as well. So thoughtful approach has been for sure the goal here on this one.
That's certainly what we're used to, Rob. Thank you for all the work you do.
The only thing that I would add, Sam, is that ultimately the general feel of that gateway as you come into town is something that we will be looking to maintain and capitalize on. So I don't want people to think like you're going to drive down the road and it's going to be completely different. I think it will be a wonderfully successful project if we can improve pedestrian, bicyclist safety, motorist safety, and have it updated. So you're driving down and you say, boy, this looks different, but it's not Orono. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Lori?
I'm very excited. I'm with Sam. These things take a long time. Perseverance. I'm so pleased that the staff has been persevering on this and it's found ways to leverage our funds to do this project. And the agenda says staff will provide a brief presentation about the project, which I think we got, RFQ process and rationale for its recommendation to select Sebago Technics. And I looked into Sebago Technics. I know they've worked for us already and they have a really impressive website, but I didn't hear that last part, which is the RFQ process and the rationale. So I know I don't want you to go on and on. I just wanted a little thumbnail sketch of that process.
So we put out the request, the RFQ in September. We received 8 proposals on October 1st. Then a town staff committee reviewed those over the next week or two and scored them based on a preset criteria that we advertised within the RFQ. Had a good discussion about who we felt was most qualified and best fit for this kind of project. And we really felt like Sebago Technics did a nice job with that. Sebago Technics is a company we've worked with quite a bit in the past on a couple of other major projects. I think the biggest one would be our Public Works facility. They were the design engineers for that one. But they also conducted the Main Street traffic study, the downtown traffic study, and I've found them to be, great to work with, very responsive, and looking forward to working with them on this one.
Great, thank you, Rob. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Hearing none. Nancy, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Councilor Greenier,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Mehnert,
In favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
and Councilor Kunz.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Great, thank you very much. We will move on to Order 2183, order authorizing the town manager to purchase 10 laptops from Dell in the amount of $7,969.50, and election equipment signage from Inclusion Solutions in the amount of $8,067.16 for the upcoming presidential election, with funds drawn from the approved and accepted Center for Tech and Civic Life grant. Take a motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Sophie, is this you?
It is. I'm just, oh, it's on top. So as council will recall, we received $159,025 grant from the Center for Tech and Civic Life for the purpose of funding necessary equipment and services for the upcoming presidential election. We've already been in front of you for an enclosed trailer, which was greatly appreciated for during the rainstorm on Saturday as we were moving things around. All told, we have expended approximately $33,000 of that. Much of that has been done in increments that are smaller than $5,000. So we've expended money on overtime and signage and smaller pieces of equipment. We have 2 purchases that trip the $5,000 spending limit that staff has, so I'm coming to you for confirmation. The 10 laptops from Dell are used for voter registration and the process of putting in the absentee ballots. And then we have an election cart and signage that is going to cost about $8,000 that we also think is very important for this process. So we still have about $120,000 of grant funds remaining. We are expecting some significant expenditures out of the funds with regard to some election day needs and cleanup after election day, because we are taking responsibility for the deep clean to the building if the university would like us to do that.
Sophie, I just had one question, and will you be able to use these laptops for anything, I mean, after Election Day? Or are the funds specific to Election Day and you're not allowed to do anything with them afterwards?
So we can purchase whatever we need for Election Day. And then we can maintain whatever we have beyond that. I don't know that we could repurpose it to a degree that it couldn't be used for future elections. I think we've got to stay within that realm. But if a laptop today can be used for the election and this process, and then for the next 6 months, we can use it for something else, as long as it's free to come back for the next election, I think we're in pretty good shape with that.
I think that's what I was wondering, is if we had the ability to use those for other purposes.
Creativity, we call that creativity.
Innovation, thank you.
Yes.
Is that, Sophie, to reduce the time of inputting the cards?
So normally with a day like yesterday, Saturday, where there were so many people that were registering to vote, we would have come back with a lot of absentee ballots that needed to be put into the system and a huge stack of cards for new registrations. Yep. Because we had those laptops, we were able to run people right through the system. We came back with a very small stack of cards and very few absentee ballots that need to be put in. So the quicker we're able to do that, the better check and balance we have to ensure that people are only voting once, which is part of the process, and the system will catch that. We're able to do it immediately, which is very nice this year.
Yeah, it's great. Anyone else have any questions or comments? I will say I saw the trailer going up to the university on Saturday, and it's pretty nice. So, Nance, will you take a vote call, please? Roll call.
Councilor Greenier,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor.
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Mehnert,
In favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
and Councilor Kunz.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Great. All right, moving on to council committee and representative reports. What if we start with finance, Mr. Perry?
Goodness gracious. We had a finance committee meeting last week. We reviewed current expense and revenue information. We had an update on the status of our audit, which was very good. And that's what I remember. Were there other things that I should remember?
That sounds about right.
I think it was pretty operationally focused. Yep. Some of those things are on the agenda tonight. And the only other piece would be updating how closely we're looking at tax collection and revenue sharing excise tax.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just checking. Sam, did you have anything for?
Nope, nothing from me.
Okay. Councilor Greenier.
Yeah, so on the community development side of things, we met on the 15th. We talked about zone changes, amending the standard related to self-storage on I-95, specifically the self-storage on Park Street. The owner wants to expand, and we're going to move forward on the zone change with the owner kind of bringing us a plan. He's going to bring us a plan to kind of look at, see where we're at with that. We also talked about the excavation/fill ordinance revision. The planning board had some recommended changes. They were recommended that enforced in agriculture that legal lots have the amount of fill should be about 200 cubic yards. They also recommended that existing driveways and off-street parking does not really need approval on 100 cubic yards for fill-in. They wanted to look at getting a checklist so the code officer can forward the planning, the need to define code officer capacity and allowable materials for fill. The planning board wants clarification on what is clean material. We also touched briefly tonight on the citizens' request. We talked about the council's resolution supporting universal health care, which we kind of modified for saying equitable health care, and we all discussed that tonight. And lastly, we had a request to apply for DEP waste diversion grant funds. The grant application to implement a pilot program for recycling for landlords with large complexes. Cheryl is actually working on the early stages of this, so she'll be bringing us some stuff as we move forward. And that's what I have.
Great.
Great, thank you. Councilor Gardner.
Yes, we met, the comp plan implementation committee met on October 5th. We had a recap of the progress in evaluating any future use of town-owned land in the Sailor development. We have discussed now moving ahead with a feasibility study so that we can find out a little bit more about what could be done with that land before we start talking about those items. We had an update on the Marden Park conceptual planning process. For a variety of reasons, we may have to change the plan from the original proposal, but the committee talked about how it was really important to at least focus on what we can, especially the drainage issues in that field, and try to do a fiscally responsible kind of take chunks at a time approach to the development of that park. We also talked about our town planners, sorry, I'm recovering from a cold. Our town planners plan to do community outreach related to some of the land use ordinance revisions that we're considering. And this would be the three reduction in the MDR minimum lot size, the village residential overlay district, and village commercial conditional zoning district. So Kyle gave us a little overview of how he plans to approach that process for collecting community feedback. We thought it sounded great. If you want to hear more about that, the meeting minutes are available, but you can also just watch the broadcast on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. So that would be October 5th. And that is it.
Great, thank you. Councilor Robertson.
Yeah, I'm almost like a pay it forward thing. We haven't met yet. But the last time that we met, we discussed the recycling program, which I brought to community development this week, as Terry mentioned. And in the meantime, in between meetings, we have there was an RFP was put out by the Department of Environmental Protection for a waste diversion grant. So we'll be talking about that. I sent that out to the committee today, and we'll have our meeting. We'll have our meeting on Thursday. But meanwhile, I've just been doing some background information and talking to staff and doing some research. We have 3,000 plus residents currently in Orono who are primarily tenants who have no access to any kind of recycling. So we'll be discussing that with the committee on Thursday night.
Great, thank you. Councilor Osher, did you have anything?
It's either for committee chairs. I am not a committee chair. Thank you for asking for my input.
Okay. I will just like to add that on October 7th, Sophie, Josh, and I joined Bangor Old Town VZ for a discussion on homelessness, and it's becoming a problem in Bangor in the sense that they're reaching their capacity of how to handle some of the people that have no home at this point. And we will probably develop into more conversations with the county as to how to move it forward in more of a regional approach. So stay tuned for that. Sophie can act.
I would just say, I think it's important for council to know that I did speak up before I spoke with council on this issue. Cindy didn't tell me to hit mute, but I don't think this is a Bangor issue. Bangor just happens to be the service hub for this region. This is an issue that impacts us all. And I really pressed Penobscot County to step up as leaders and kind of force people to the table, because some of the largest county taxpayers were not sitting at that table to try to solve the problem, and significant contributors in terms of population. So I just want you to be aware I'm speaking on your behalf in a way that I think you would support, but if you don't like it, you should probably tell me now, because I've become the rabble rouser in the group.
Sophie, I really would like to add to that, that I think that in the general scheme of things of what we're dealing with, this is a huge and important thing that I think that we typically, or at least I'll put myself out as that I hear things about when citizens are concerned about things that are just different things, but I will put it out like I always have put it out there, is that I'm on the board of directors for Health Equity Alliance. We deal with the most marginalized communities, which includes this segment, which has many, many different types of reasonings why they're there. As a fellow veteran, I've actually bumped into people who are veterans that are sitting there trying to find a place. And so I ask the citizens also in our town, as opposed to just always picking out what we're not doing, there's a lot that you can be doing. So if you still, like I said before, if you want to be part of Health Equity Alliance, I'm a board member, come see me, and I would love to have your help with these things. So I'm glad that this was a topic, and I know that you'll represent us well, because this is definitely a big issue.
I heard a bit of this in the news, and I was hoping that we would get an update like this. So just again, what other communities are involved with this? I know you're reaching out to the entire county, but in numbers there is great strength with this.
So the city of Bangor reached out to everybody in this general region. The people that showed up, Cindy, Josh, and I showed up to represent Orono. Old Town was represented, Bangor was represented, VZ was represented, and Penobscot County was represented. That's it. So we didn't have Brewer, Hamden, Herman, Holden, other communities, Glenburn. There are communities in this region that would be great to have at the table. But one of the things, and I don't know if we want to elevate Josh for this part of the conversation, when Josh and I were rehashing the homelessness discussion, we also were talking about another group is having conversation about the jail and the fact that our jail will not hold the population that they're pushing into the jail. And we can have a whole long discussion about the fact that there maybe shouldn't be people in the jail, but the fact is, even with all the jail diversion programs out there, we still have an overpopulated jail. And I am concerned. We talk about homelessness, we talk about mental health issues, we talk about the jail population. When the district attorney suggests to our chief of police that one way around the overcrowding issue and the issue with the court system is to not summons people for underage drinking and possession of alcohol, which is a critical piece of our education process and trying to keep people safe in our community. We have a bigger social issue here, and I think that it is very important for us to try to come together as people who are not just going to talk about it, but actually try to do something about it.
Sophie, is there any help or anything happening at the state level? And also my other question was about this sense of urgency, because winter is coming. So Go ahead.
City of Bangor has an incredible sense of urgency right now. And I think Kathy and her team are doing incredible work trying to get the state to come to the table. The state sees this as a Bangor issue. One of the problems that we are running into is the fact that many of the people who are not in taking advantage of some of the services out there are not able to because of significant substance abuse issues or mental health issues that don't let them access the service the way the service is provided right now. So we were talking with the city of Bangor a little bit about wraparound services and how can we try to find services that put somebody in a safe place and wraps around that assistance that they need. It's a balance. You don't want to be intrusive. You know, if a person doesn't want service, you can't really drag them to it until you reach a certain level. But this is a bigger issue, and it's not one that we can, I think, kick down to Bangor. And I think it's one that if we wait for somebody else to solve it for us, we're going to be waiting for a very long time. So based on the nodding of heads, it sounds like Josh and I can go forth and be rabble rousers.
Yes.
Please do. I find it incredibly disappointing that the county wants to center this as a Bangor problem, because it really highlights a big problem with the homelessness issue, which is that when a lot of people think of homelessness, they think of the people that they might see directly in front of them who are taking up public space in some way or making them uncomfortable in some way. And unfortunately for that population, usually all folks want to do is to call the police. And that's not, folks don't have any other options to call or don't know who else to call. But in addition, so in some ways, yes, that kind of homelessness is very visible in a larger city like Bangor, but there's so much invisible homelessness where people are living in their cars or they are going from couch to couch, and maybe one day that string of couches runs out. I mean, there are people who are trying to maybe conceal the fact that they're without services and without a home. It's a much larger problem than, are there transient people in my, neighborhood park that are bothering me? And I find it really disappointing that the county would really just be focusing on, what's going on in Bangor when it's a much, much larger systemic problem than that. And it's everywhere, even in Orono.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the services and the work that the city of Bangor is doing to relocate people, or we've had out-of-state residents come up and they've put them back on a bus if they're assured that someone at the other end can take care of them. So it's quite a complicated process, and it was eye-opening, and I think Sophie and Josh should go forth and rabble rouse. So with that.
Please keep us posted on this too, as it's going to definitely be an ongoing thing. Thank you.
Oh, just have a question. Is one of the challenges, besides what increase in homelessness may have occurred from the economic impact of COVID public health, there's a decrease in the available beds, because for COVID public health, the shelters that provided beds are now having social distancing, so they have less beds to provide. Is that because these are COVID related perturbances in the availability, is there a possibility that the state or federal government has funding available specifically for homeless shelters and finding places for people?
Didn't sound that way. I mean, things like the city of Bangor with police department was saying they used to use their reception area as a place for people to get warm, and due to COVID restrictions, they can't do that anymore. So things like that are just complicating, but Josh can probably speak to it better than I can.
The only thing I didn't hear and I would add is that Bangor made it very clear that the manager, Kathy Conlow, said there is somebody inviting people to Bangor on a Facebook page that is being supported wholeheartedly by thousands of people who think it's a good idea to invite people to Bangor that are homeless. Because at one point they had the Ramada open as a hotel. And that has caused a dramatic increase in the number of people arriving in Bangor with no plan and no more services available. When they talked about last year there being 20 or 24 people on the street this time of year, and this year there being 130 to 140, I think a large part of that might be caused by someone who has the best of intentions, but doesn't have the means on this end to provide for those services. So that seems like a problem that needs to be solved. I don't have the solution, but the invitation of homeless people to come to Bangor for services that are not available is doing them a huge disservice, particularly with winter coming.
And Chief, I'd like to couple that with there was a recent and kind of pointing at this being a pretty much countrywide thing that everybody needs to look at. There was a statement today that I heard that was September, 8 million more people were living in poverty in the US for whatever reasons. I'm sure COVID had a play in it, but this is something that's going to be amplified and continue to be amplified, and figuring out how to best handle this is going to be, it's going to be a big task.
Yeah. Anything else, Sophie or Josh? Nope. All right. Well, thank you, Josh, for adding that. We will move on to number 10, updates from, I'll switch it around, town manager and council chair, and let the town manager go first.
After discussion with the council chair, I spent some time over the weekend creating a prepared statement that provided a logical and detailed description of the town's non-discrimination and anti-bias policies, our practices, and training efforts in an effort to provide an operational update to our racial equity and justice discussions. Earlier this afternoon, when I read those words back, I found that my general message was actually getting lost in the detail. So what I'd like to share with you tonight is a general message, and if you have questions about the detail, I've written it all down, so I'm sure I remember a significant amount of it. Orono is a unique and wonderful community to live and raise a family in, in large part due to the level of care and concern its residents give to one another, the community at large, and the larger world that we live within. The community's recognition of racial injustice and calls for action to unite and create meaningful system change is expected as our residents grapple with the national events. They are not wrong, as there is much work to be done to improve the public understanding of the existing racial divide and systemic racism within our country, and to implement change that ensures equity and justice in the access, opportunities, and treatment of all people across our nation. We should all be working to end racism, ferret out the foundations and systems within our society that support and continue racial and social inequities. The end goal is noble, just, and needed. However, to effect meaningful change for our community, we have to first understand our current position, the efforts that have already been made, and how we contribute both positively and negatively to the landscape. Since arriving in Orono nearly a decade ago, I've worked with my staff to build a pleasant, productive, professional, and safe environment that supports equitable and inclusive service delivery to the community. Calls in the community that staff needs training about racial and cultural diversity presupposes that this is something we have not already done, when, to the contrary, this is the foundation of the respectful, service-oriented culture that we've been building over the last 9+ years. Organizational cultures are built one brick at a time in an ongoing process that should never stagnate. We started with traditional anti-harassment and non-discrimination policies, evolved to prioritizing a respectful work environment focused on professionalism, inclusivity, and equity, and last year began the process of recognizing the implicit biases that we build based upon our upbringing, education, social network, and experiences. All of our employees have been receiving this training and fully understand the expectations related to their professionalism and respectful, inclusive delivery of town services. For example, in 2019, the town shut down all but critical response services to provide a half-day all-staff training about implicit bias. Our public safety services remain state and regional leaders in anti-discrimination, anti-bias policy implementation, and routine-related training. In late 2006, during the CALIA field assessment exit interview, accreditation assessors expressed how impressed they were that such a small rural law enforcement agency in a state that decidedly lacks racial diversity was taking the policy development, training, and supervisory oversight related to anti-bias and race-based policing so seriously. The current social movement related to racial injustice has opened a much-needed national conversation about how we as a society can effectively address longstanding systemic injustice. Given the events of this summer, I fully understand the scrutiny currently being leveled at municipal services. I also understand why the community would want the town council as the elected representative body of our community to lend its voice to convening this local conversation. As a private citizen, I have particular awareness of the challenges faced by individuals of color in our society. For the last 30 years, I've had a firsthand seat as members of my family have talked about their experiences as Black people living in Maine. I've watched the way people treat my husband and children and have unfortunately grown adept at understanding safety considerations that I hazard many white families in our community probably have not had to navigate. So I get why this discussion is important. And I understand that discrimination pervades the services. Folks, I hate this. I don't normally bring my personal life to work. A commitment to equity, whether it be racial or based on somebody's gender or their sexual identity, their orientation, is not just words on a page. It is something that we take so seriously here. And it is part of my core value set. I understand the community is calling for action. But at this moment in time, it would be nice if people could come and understand that this is not something new for us. We have been working so hard at getting better. Since 2011, when I came here, it was part of my marching orders when I was hired. We're not perfect. We can definitely grow, but it feels as though this microscope has been turned on us in a way where people think that we don't have any understanding. And I hope that we can all work together. Our next step is to work with staff within our internal training systems to gain a better understanding of what they have not experienced and what they do not understand. As I said, this is a work in progress, one that has been underway for quite some time, and one that will continue to evolve until we reach a point where equity and inclusivity are the absolute norm.
Thank you, Sophie. I know that wasn't easy to do. From the council perspective, I know it seems like I have not been doing much, but I have been chasing different facilitators. And as you can imagine, this is a popular and well-needed area of discussion. And so in our area, there are not as many facilitators to go around as one would think. So I have been working with different facilitators. I've reached out to another this afternoon. and I've also been wrestling with what council's role is with this. I think council is really needs to look at more of a policy level and how we set the tone of government and the policies and the ordinances and the watching of systemic racism through ordinances or zoning or whatnot. So I personally think, and I think council agrees with me, be looking at a much higher level community-based committees, discussion as to how we can implement policy and let the town operations continue on the path that they're going, which I know I've heard over the years how many times that the staff has done different trainings. I also remember staff saying that they would love to have a little bit more diverse police, law enforcement. They have tried and tried and tried. They have a few women now, which we're very proud of. And as we diversify in this area, we will seek to get more diverse police officers. So I don't know if council has any questions of me or of Sophie as to what's happening. And council, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say first, thank you, Sophie. You shouldn't have had to say those things, but I really appreciate that you. I know you don't like to bring your personal life to work, and that is not what a town manager is supposed to do. And I know how strongly you feel about that, and I know that was difficult, and I really appreciate that you were willing to do that. Thank you. And it is important for our community to understand that, and I just want to highlight and emphasize what Sophie said. These were her marching orders. This is why she was hired in part. This is part of what she understood her role to be when she was hired by that council, was to make some systemic institutional changes in the town of Orono. And she's been doing that, and our staff has been doing that. And no one is perfect, and change takes time, but it's happening. So thank you for that. And thank you to Council Chair as well. I know that this is an issue that is very important to Cindy, and she has been trying to figure out a way to approach it. I know that there also were a lot of roadblocks to this process over the last few months that are entirely out of Cindy's control, but progress is ongoing. And one thing that Cindy said when we talked about this last week is that, she was talking about the importance of building relationships, that sure, we could throw a committee together and say, here, we have a committee, do you feel better about it? But it might not be effective. And building relationships is the key to making long-term change that really matters, that really sticks. And so it's really important that we're going to approach this thoughtfully and carefully and respectfully. And our first responsibility as a council of 7 white people, is to listen and not assume. So we are trying to undergo that process and bring together community members so that we can listen first and then talk about how to best approach something more permanent going forward. And so we appreciate everyone's patience as we try to bring all of the folks to the table who should be at that table for that conversation. Yeah, that's it.
I think I want to echo a lot of the comments. Sophie, thank you for sharing that. I know it was hard. I know it's not necessarily your job to do that, but I think it's really important to do that, to let that out. I mean, the old axiom from Stephen Covey, I think, seek first to understand, then be understood. But it comes down to communication too. So we are doing, I think, yes, there's room for improvement. Yes, there are things being done for this. But if the community does not know this, which could be some people, they may not be paying attention until something flares up, or something that we haven't been communicating clearly, or we assume people have heard it. but I think there's a lot of assumptions on a lot of different ways, but I think we need to somehow communicate more clearly with what we're doing. And I know we probably feel we're doing a fine job, but if this clearly is a passionate issue everywhere right now, especially in our community, I think we need to, not placing any fault, but I think one of the areas of improvement would be communicating. The idea that Cindy has floated about a larger sort of community-based committee, if you will, for lack of a better term, I think that's one way to have that discussion more fluidly than, you know, it's just like anything else we do here where we have something at a council meeting, but we've had it in a workshop for 8 times, you know what I mean, beforehand, where we talked about things. That doesn't always get picked up, even though it was available or recordings available. I think it's on us to, yes, we're going to err by communicating this even one more time. So I'm not throwing blame at all. I just think we're still massaging the kinks out of this. And I guess that's kind of where I am. I think we all can improve. I know things have been mentioned about training. I think we as council could lead by example and certainly benefit from some sort of training too, if that were something that we're going to come up down the road. Not that I have a bunch of free time I want to put in, but this is important to all of us, right? I think we are all on the same page with this, and it's a very delicate thing to walk through to not make a misstep or a missed
So that's a good point, Sam, and I think it brings up one of those like how the sausage is made kind of things that people don't really understand, like some of the logistical issues. Like, for example, sure, it is a great idea for council to have some sort of training, and I think one of the things that Cindy's been struggling with for the last few months is we are also legally obligated to have an open meeting for the public when the 7 of us are in a room together. And so a lot of these trainings really rely on the value of a private, intimate setting where people can really dig into some of their more personal issues or how they were raised or implicit biases they might have. And that is very tricky when you talk about it being a public meeting for a council. So one of the things that Cindy's been trying to figure out is, how to maybe, if we have to do it in public as a public meeting, can we pivot instead to, how do we as a legislative body approach policy making in this way? And so again, like, just, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but what I'm saying is the logistics of making this all work are more complicated than I think the public really understands for a variety of reasons. And I would like us to probably be as vocal as we can about communicating those logistics and how it all works. But that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Megan, for filling in all the things I've forgotten. But one of the other things that I would like to do this community, stakeholder meeting and do a lot of listening. One of the questions that I've also been struggling with is that a type of meeting that we should do over Zoom? I would think it would be more impactful if we were all in the same room together. And so that raises the issue of how large does it get? Do we have, other members of the public there? And so we've been kind of wrestling through some of that as well. So believe us, this has not gone off our radar, and I will do better at communicating what council's doing. And Sophie's done a great job of letting us know what town's operations are doing. So, Lori?
So you're saying that there will be some kind of stakeholder meeting? Is that what you said?
That's what we're working on, yep.
So, and this, Sophie, I appreciate your presentation and your preparation in advance so that you made sure that you presented all the points. And I applaud who you are. That's why we are hired. You're hired for all of who you are, including after you got your master's in public administration, working for nonprofits. When you bring that experience to being the town manager here, that is a value added, just as your life experience is a value added. And so I I guess we disagree on whether or not you should have your personal life be part of your job, because I think you bring your experience to do your job better. And I thank you for sharing that information with us. I thank you for leading the innovations or equity efforts that you've already done over the time you've been our town manager. And I also appreciate, and I have a heartfelt thanks to the citizens who brought forward this letter that we all received this afternoon, and 229 community members signed this letter requesting that there would be some kind of justice and equity committee in the town. I think that's a great idea. I know that the town, from what Sophie has told us, has been making efforts, and we are lauded by the police, CALEA, because we have met the criteria to be a CALEA police force, and that there's always more to do. Our whole country was founded on taking people's land and using people as slaves, and it's embedded in everything we do. So the efforts we make are all great, but there's so much more that we need to do. And just as we have a tree board where people who know a lot about trees advise our staff and our council about how to proceed, I think that this is an opportunity for us to have a justice and equity committee where people who know about this and work on this and experience these, trying to make these changes, would be our advisors. And so I support this group of citizens that has requested that we investigate having a justice and equity committee for the town. And every time that Cindy is so nice to ask me what my committee report is when it's time to ask committee reports, and I'm the one who doesn't have a committee, I'd be happy to take this on as a committee responsibility. And I'd be glad to be in conversation about that.
Okay.
Just quick reference is that I think the reason Cindy asks you that, Lori, is because when you first joined council, you asked to be asked about the meetings you were attending, which is great. We love to hear that you go to these meetings that and learn things about municipal government that are very valuable to us. So I think that's why she asks you. And then she also asks all the other councilors. It's not just about committees.
I'm not
but a sausage is made comment again is just to underscore, the logistical situation. We have, we've mentioned this before, but not everyone in the public attends every meeting, obviously. The plan was to convene a committee, not a committee, a roundtable discussion with community stakeholders so that we could then think about and talk about like what would be, if we were going to create a permanent group in some capacity, what kind of group would it be and how would it interact with town council and town government? So it's not, I appreciated the letter we received today, and I love that so many residents are passionate about this issue. This is part of our plan, but there's a big difference between a commission and a committee or an advisory group, or there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And I think that listening first to the community stakeholders, at least the way Cindy and I have talked about it, would make a lot of sense for us to think about, well, what's the right fit for Orono? And what role does that group play in town government? Because we're not Bangor, we're not any other, we're Orono. So what makes sense for our committee, for our community and our residents and the people who live and work and recreate here.
Yeah. So it'll be a progression and we'll see where we end up. So with that, I will move to future agenda item concern. Lori, I'll start with you.
I would like to be involved in these discussions and these strategies for addressing racial equity and justice. And I would be happy to be the liaison with the people who wrote this letter. And that's a really important issue to me. And so I'd like that to be a future agenda item.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Robertson? Nothing?
I'm good.
Okay.
Move on.
Councilor Kunz?
I'm all set.
Councilor Greenier?
I don't have an item, but I really felt like I needed to interject something just based on the last conversation. First of all, I struggle with this constantly when I say that we have amazing individuals who are part of our town. But as a person who falls within a minority group, one of the things that we've been told over and over again is that and me as a white male, is to be good listeners. And I think that we fall very short and then point fingers at others to tell them that we maybe not communicate well or whatever. So through this whole conversation, my mind went in many different ways. And I felt like we went back to the crosswalk again of people who maybe don't quite understand the significance and symbolism of something that was created. And I'm not saying that these aren't great things that people do to kind of be part of a process, but I feel like a lot of times we white-splain things so much that people who really are in it, that live it, get hurt. So as we move forward with these things, I would really just ask people to be really aware. If you don't fall into those categories, be very aware of the impact it has based on people's lives and how they've lived their life and what they deal with still. And I mean, like I say, I am in the minority category and I deal with stuff still. And it's a struggle when people don't listen. So I ask that people listen.
Thank you. Councilor Perry,
I'm all set, thank you.
Councilor Gardner,
Just another quick, how the sausage is made. The reason, just for folks out there who may not know, the reason that Cindy and I have been working on this and not including other counselors is just because by the rules of how council works, if there are more than 2 of us, we have to start publicly noticing meetings and it becomes a public meeting. So sometimes, a lot of times Cindy and I will be meeting with Sophie on these, logistical issues or meeting with potential facilitators. And so if we were to include other counselors in those conversations, it would become a public meeting. So just again, nuts and bolts, how council and the law works. Other than that, I have nothing.
okay.
I just like to say, I really appreciate Cindy, your work and Megan's work in this area. I know it's a lot of extra time and a lot of extra responsibility, and thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you. And I will get better at updating and how the sausage is made. So public petitions, we don't have any. Sophie, did you have anything to comment before? No. Lori?
Thank you, Megan, for saying that the reason Cindy calls on me is you want to hear about the things that I'm doing outside of council that make me, that inform my work in council. So I will share that this week. And I do these things no longer covered as council training because the council doesn't have a budget for it. So I pay for this out of my own, but I do them because I care about planning and management and town issues. So on Thursday, I'll be attending Growth Smart Maine's 2020 Summit, which is at Jeff's Catering in Bangor. And if people are interested in it, they should get in touch with me and I'll tell you about it. It's a fabulous organization and that's 8:30 to 3:30, but I'll be taking a break to attend a Alpha Institute and Maine Humanities Council training on race and real estate at 11:30 to 1. So that happens to be that both fall on the same day. So I am interested in things outside of it. I do not have a council committee, but I do things that help me be more informed. And so those are the examples. Thanks, Megan, for suggesting I should.
Thank you, Lori. We appreciate it when you bring it back to us. Public comments. Is there anyone that wants to make a comment? Ruthie Clements put her hand up.
Hi, my name is Ruthie Clements. I am a grad student at the University of Maine, and I'm part of a group of Orono community members who wrote and has been circulating the letter that was sent out to you all this afternoon. And I just wanted to present an update on that for the folks who are listening in and talk a little bit about what it is. And I really want to preface by saying that we greatly appreciate all of the work that Orono Town Council has done towards racial equity and justice work. And we recognize that it is a long and hard process. but we do have some specific things that we would like to ask the council to do, to commit to help further that work and the goals that you all have already set. So for folks who haven't seen this petition, I'd like to just read it out loud first and then talk about some of the support that we've already gathered behind it. And keeping in mind that this letter is centered around racial inequity, but our intention is really for it to apply to all forms of systemic inequities like LGBTQ+ inequity, economic and class inequity, disability, and religious inequity. So the letter reads, Dear Orono Town Council, we, the undersigned Orono community members, are deeply concerned about racial justice and equity in our town. We appreciate the beginning steps that the Orono Town Council has taken in discussing these issues. By signing this letter, we ask that Council further this work and commit to the following 3 things. Number 1, create an ongoing justice and equity committee for the town of Orono by the end of November 2020 that is initially charged with the following tasks. A, place racial justice and equity as top priorities across all town departments while furthering initiatives surrounding all forms of systemic inequity and bias. B, serve as a resource to the town for ongoing education and engagement in issues of justice and equity, including anti-racism trainings for staff and council. C, encourage coordination in justice and equity work across RSU 26, the University of Maine, religious communities, and town of Orono departments and businesses. The initial focus of this committee can be expanded as needed based on ongoing recommendations from the committee itself and information obtained via community member input and the anti-racism trainings described in item 2 below. Item 2, implement in-depth, live, or at least via Zoom, anti-racism trainings for all town of Orono staff and council members by January 2021. These trainings should be led by facilitators who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and the facilitators should be adequately compensated for their time. Item 3, provide updates on the above initiatives to the Orono community monthly during town council meetings, e.g. money being spent, training firms being considered, and other progress toward implementing items 1 through 2 above. We deeply thank you for your ongoing commitment to justice and equity and your prompt action on these matters. Sincerely, the undersigned. And as of today, I just want to note that 229 Orono community members have signed the letter, and 74% of those are Orono residents, and the other folks work or study or worship in Orono or somehow consider it to be part of their community. So we asked people to sign this by November 1st, and we may still get some more signatures. But as of now, that's where we're at. And to sum up again, we are asking the committee to, or the town council, to really commit to creating a justice and equity committee and to commit to greater transparency, which I think is all things that has been brought up in this meeting already. But greater transparency and communication with community members is needed. And I'd like to ask if you all would commit to creating an ongoing committee for justice and equity work in the town council.
Can I ask you a question, Ruthie?
Yeah.
What do you see as the outcome? What are the goals and objectives of this type of committee?
I mean, the committee would have to determine some of those goals and objectives working with community members. One of the goals is to make people in the Orono community feel safe and belonging.
Do you feel like the people in Orono do not feel safe?
I think that there are some, but I am not one to answer that question.
Ruthie, I appreciate your question. I don't think that council is willing to make a commitment at this point without having any listening sessions or anything formal as of yet. And also, I think I personally want to be very careful that I am not giving away a council authority to a committee not until until I know what it is and what the ramifications would be of council giving away authority to a committee. So I am more than happy to discuss this with council after we have some listening sessions to better understand where we are. But I don't believe that council is ready to do any sort of committing to a committee at this particular point in time. Is there anything else? No. Sarah? I think it's Sarah Marks. Go ahead, Sarah. Sarah, you're allowed to speak, but you're still muted.
Val, is this something you can help with?
I can't. I have, all I have is the ask to unmute button. I don't have the unmute. She has written a comment saying that there are 3 goals listed on the petition under point 1.
I would say again that we've, council did receive that letter this afternoon, and we attempted to address some of it today. I think that's why Sophie made the statement and I tried to update. We will continue with this. It is an ongoing effort, and I will hope to have something in place or more progress by mid to end of November. Anyone else? There's 2 other.
Yeah, Sarah has re-signed in and Sonia.
Yeah. So Sarah's allowed to speak at this point.
Can you hear me this time?
We can.
Hey, nice to talk to you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all you've been doing and for a really great meeting. I just wanted to chime in that I do think that an ongoing committee is something that you could commit to at this point. I understand the concern about how, if it was going to become a commission and have all kinds of oversight and legal oversight, that's different. But we have town boards and committees about beautification and trees and all kinds of things in our town. And I thought that I signed the petition, and I thought it was pretty clear that the original ask was for a committee that would simply have a consultation role to the council and nothing else to start. That it would simply be something that could, a group that could consult with the town about the kind of trainings that you might have, who you might hire to run them, all the other questions you guys have been talking about and struggling with, and where you might find those facilitators. So I guess I've been at every meeting. I don't think I'm somebody who hasn't been following the council and hasn't been listening and up to date on what you guys have been doing and talking about. I've very much appreciated all the things you've done so far. And I think it is possible to make a commitment for something ongoing in our town. I love trees, I love beautification, but I think that having a committee that was focused on the people of our town and making sure that they were all being equitably treated and included at all points in time would just be great. I don't think it's a criticism of anything you guys have been doing. I certainly don't think it's a criticism of anything that the town staff have already done in their trainings. I didn't sign it, certainly with that in mind. I signed it thinking of it as forwarding what you guys have been doing and growing that further and giving you more resources to build what you want to build going forward. So I guess that's really what I wanted to say. I think that the ongoing part is what's really important to people in town. When I've been in conversations with folks, what people want to know is that there's an ongoing commitment on the part of the council, not just a one-time meeting or a 2-time meeting, because no one thinks that these issues are going to be solvable in any kind of short term. They're big issues everywhere in the country, not Orono, just everywhere. So I think the ongoing ask is what's really big for people, and wanting to know that that's what you're moving toward, and wanting to know that there's a clear timeline, because it has been 5 months since the killing of George Floyd when these conversations sort of began in the community. And I know they began shortly thereafter in council. And I think, 5 months is a long time already. And people would like to know that you've got that focus on something that would be permanent for our town and that would continue to address these issues structurally way into the future. I completely agree that if it became a commission and all those other things, there'd be lots of other considerations. But I guess that's the main thing. And I also do think that figuring out how to report back to people in the town about it is really important, because I've been at, I think, all the meetings or gone back and watched them all. And it's actually really hard. If you log on to the website, you can find on 2 different agendas where anything about racial equity or justice was mentioned. I know it was talked about other times because I was at those meetings, but if you logged in later and you tried to find them, it's really hard to find. And I'm not sure what your structures and rules are of how you could adjust that. If there's a way to post something, the meeting minutes, maybe that would add something without watching the whole tape, to say it was talked about at this meeting and this meeting and this meeting, might make it easier for other folks to log on. And I think the last thing I would say is the last point on the petition about regular updates. I just keep thinking there's so many things you guys are trying to decide and figure out where there's a lot of wealth of experience in the community. And I, again, don't know your regulations and what you can share at meetings, but if it's possible to share more details rather than less, my guess is you might save yourselves a lot of time. If you had 3 different trainers you were considering, odds are really high that many people in town have done trainings with them already, and you might get feedback about, we loved this one, they were great, or other such things, including even money. People in town have mentioned to me that they know trainings cost money, and some people have said to me, gosh, we would donate specifically to the town just for that. And I know, fiscal considerations are real. So I think, like, the more details that can be reported back to the community, the easier I would hope that your guys' jobs could be. And I think I'll just end by saying again, thank you to everyone on council and to Sophie and staff for all of the things you're already doing. And thank you to everyone who signed the petition. It's really kind of cool to live in a town with this many folks who are so passionate and committed and really do want to both listen to one another and move forward as a community. So thank you all.
Thank you, Sarah. I think we'll go to Sonia. She also has her hand raised.
I think Sarah said everything that I was going to say and then some. So I'll echo her sentiments, and thank you again for your attention to this.
Thank you very much. We all did get the letter this afternoon. I am sure that it will garner more discussion with council. I just don't think that we're at a position to commit to anything at this point in time, but we will definitely discuss it and get forward on it.
Cindy, can I throw something? I think one thing that we are committed to is addressing this, is just and continuing this discussion. I'm just personally, and I think this is the vibe I'm getting from the rest or most, is that we need to figure out what the best way of doing that is in line with other things that are happening right now. 2, are we committed to addressing this? 100%. I don't think there's one person here that would be against that. So I want to make sure that's perfectly clear. And I think everybody, I think Sonia and Sarah and Connie and the other, hopefully the other 229 people or 226, pretty good with math. You see the 220. Okay. I think they would all understand that we are part of this. Okay. That we are on board with this. And so we're not against this by showing some hesitancy to figure out what the best mechanism is, if it be a committee or a slightly large one that very much deals with this issue in conjunction with other things. So I think that's all I have to say. for now.
Great, thank you. With that, I guess I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Another
Yep.
hand, oh, stop, hang on. Another hand is up.
Got something to say.
No, I just received word that we want to make sure we know that we have in-person absentee voting in council chambers on Thursday, the 22nd of October. We've added Thursday, October 29th and October 30th. Those are from 7:30 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of somebody's decision of how they want to vote. But the reason we are offering these times is to allow for voters to trickle in, to not have social distancing issues, to maintain as safe an environment for people to be able to vote and hand us their ballots as we can. And we would really encourage as many people as feel comfortable to vote before Election Day to come on in and do that. And my pitch is always, if you don't want to come in at all, but you are eligible to vote and you need to know how to do that, you can check out our website. We've got a great absentee voting button, but we also have clerks down front who will answer your call, 866-2556. Just call and we will try to get you a ballot.
I think another hand came up perhaps in response to my comment, Cindy, not to prolong this, but it looks like Sarah has a second wind.
I think, Sam, we're kind of done for the night. Wait, I understand Sarah's statement. So with that, Nancy, can we take a vote? Show of hands? All right.
It can be just a show of hands.
All right. Oh, it passes. We are in adjournment. Thank you.